Good morning. This is Dr. Nancy Johnson. It's Monday morning, the Monday after bar exam results were released in California. And I assume if you're watching this video that you're one of the folks who needs to retake the California bar exam. First, let me acknowledge how painful that is. And second, tell you that there are steps you can take to greatly increase your chances of passing the bar exam. You do not start from the same place you were when you studied the last time. You start at a higher plateau. Everything you learned will come back to you rapidly. And I will have some things to say about how to focus what you're doing on what most needs to improve and what stands the most chance of raising your score on the California bar. I will also at the end have some things to say about other resources available to you, including a Patreon channel that we are building out right now that will give you more detailed reviews of the law. But let's get into that letter that you got from the bar examiners. It was a fairly long thing giving you all kinds of information about the scoring. Contained within that information is the scoring equation for this particular bar. You always need a 1390 or higher to pass the bar exam. That's a scaled score. So they take your written scores and they scale them, and the equation changes every bar exam. So for this one, what that translates to is that you needed a total raw written score of 425.23 points. In other words, essentially 426 points. That means you needed to average a score of 60.75 across the essays and the performance test in order to reach that level of performance. Of course, if you take the general bar exam, so you have a written score and you have an MBE score, you don't have to pass each section separately. You just have to reach the total score of 1390. But let's talk about what the scaling means this time. In essence, what that means is that for every 5 written score points, raw score points, score on an essay, for every 5 points, that translates to 23 scaled score points. Now that's pretty stunning. When you think about that scaled score and the letter you got, it may look to you as if you're miles away from passing the exam, but think about that. Every 5 points you get on an essay would add 23 scaled score points to your score. And now think about the performance test, because its score is doubled. So if you got 5 extra points on the PT, you would raise your scaled score by 46 points. So if you're looking at a score that's down in the low 1300s instead of 1390, if you were to score 5 points higher on the PT, add 46 scaled score points, and see how close you'd be to that pass line. Those scaled scores are really hard to look at and to put into real terms, and that's what I'm trying to do here for you. So what about your MBE score? How do you know how much you have to improve there if you're below a 1390 on the MBE? That's harder for us to say because NCBE does not release any kind of information that lets us know how many items it took to get to the 1390 level on the MBE. So the best I can do for you is to suggest that you take that scaled score on the MBE and you divide it by 10. So if you got, say, a 1350 on the MBE, divide by 10, that would mean you were at a 135 and where you need to be is at a 139, which tells you that you're 4 items short on the MBE. Now, I know that's not as precise as you would like, but that's all we can do with the lack of information from NCBE. I can tell you from the public news release that the Cal Bar put out that the mean MBE score in California was well below the level needed to get to a 1390. Okay, so what about your letter? First, look at that raw written score and know that what you needed was essentially 426 points. Take a look at how far below or above that line you were. And think about the quickest way to raise that score. The one that will give you the most for the effort you put in. And that is probably the performance test, because if you can raise your performance test score by 5 points, that means 10 raw score points toward that written total. So every 5 points you gain on the PT adds 10 points to the written score. And as I said earlier, that means 46 scaled score points toward that magic number of 1390. That's huge. And that brings you closer and closer to that line, or buys you extra points toward the MBE or any essay you have trouble with. Next, look at that MBE scaled score, and as I suggested, divide by 10. And look at how far your score then is from 139, which is where it would need to be at the pass level on the MBE. Now, what are your relative strengths and weaknesses? What was your PT score on this bar exam? If you got a 65 on the PT, you got more points than you needed on the PT, and you should be able to raise that even more. If your PT score was quite low, that would drive your written score way down. And I would always suggest more work on the performance test, more really good quality practice with released PTs. Lastly, look at the score range on your written exam, on the essays in particular. Did you get any 65s or 70s? If your score range was quite wide, if you got 65s and 70s and then some very low scores, it's likely that you have trouble with your understanding of the law being deep enough to be able to accurately spot issues in certain subjects. If all of your scores are below 65, then this is more likely a problem with the actual task of doing those essays, pulling out issue clusters in those hypotheticals quickly enough to be able to write the kind of answer the Cal Bar wants. So where do you go from here? Well, you need to tailor your study to what you need to improve. It takes relatively more time to try to improve a subject like property than it would to practice and improve your PT score. Some of us have trouble with the MBE. It's my relative weakness. Having said that, if your score is quite low on the PT, in essence, you can't make up for that in the written exam. So you have to get that MBE score up to within, say 10 items of that 139. Much below that, and you're not going to be able to compensate with the written. So if the MBE is really weak, get on the MBE and practice as many items as you can, one at a time, good quality practice. If your written score is your weakness, then work on the PT in particular, but on your exam strategy on the essays as well. And what can we offer you in the way of help? If you're watching this on YouTube and you haven't already done so, check out the debriefs of the essays on our channel. I have been posting debriefs of bar exam essays, so you can go through the issue spot with me. I will be posting the February ones as rapidly as I can. Those are all out on YouTube. We've begun building a Patreon channel. That would be patreon.com/barsecrets. In that channel, I've begun with a tier of membership that will give you our original detailed lectures in the subjects on the California bar. I've completed editing and loading contracts and torts, and I'm adding to it every day. That paid tier is a quite inexpensive way to get much more detailed coverage of the law from us. And I welcome any feedback on what you would like to see in that Patreon channel. And finally, if you want to use any of our courses or our materials in power law, go to our website and decide what you would like to subscribe to. And if you're ordering a course or Power Law Pro or Power Law Basic, you can use the discount code Conquer July 2024 to get a 15% discount from now through June 3rd. Take the time you need to grieve over that letter and the need to retake the bar exam, whether that's embarrassment, depression, anger, whatever you're feeling. Take the time to work through it, and then let's get back on it. You can do this. As I said, you start from a higher plateau and you target your work to what you need to beef up this next time. We wish you all the best on the July 2024 bar exam, and we expect to see you join us in the profession.